Hello and welcome to tonight's lecture on Israel. I'm Talita. Talita Höhl is my name. I'm from Germany and I will give you the lecture for tonight. It's part of a 5-part series of lectures called A Fresh Perspective on Israel. Tonight we will have the 4th part, The Modern State of Israel. Welcome to everyone who has joined us here in Jesus Hausgemeinde, Jesus House Church, Keilat Bet Yeshua here in Germany, Fulda. And welcome to everyone who is online there in the online meeting. And also welcome to everyone who will watch this recorded video later on YouTube. Hello and welcome to the 4th part of our series of lectures. Today we'll talk about the modern state of Israel. How we're going to do this tonight. First of all, I will pray shortly and then I will give you some more instructions. We will listen to a song and then I will give you the teaching that takes a little more than 1 hour, and later you have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any questions and you're here, then you can raise your hand. I'll give you the microphone and you can ask your question. If you're joining us online and you have a question, then you can raise your online hand. I don't know how to say it. Like you will raise your hand and then you can ask a question yourself. So if you turn on the camera and the microphone, you will be seen and heard also in the recording. If you don't want this, then you can just write your question in the chat and I will read it out and answer. But as I said, this will be at the very end of tonight's meeting. So first of all, we will listen to a song and then we will have the teaching. And before all of that, as we're Christians, we want to pray and invite Jesus in this meeting. God, we thank you so much for tonight. We thank you for the state of Israel, and we thank you that we can see your finger, your plan, your guidance in the history of Israel, in the establishment of the state of Israel. And we just ask you for your presence tonight, that you will give us wisdom to understand, to explain, and to see how everything is connected and how everything is in your plan. So we thank you for your presence. We invite you in this evening, and we want you to guide this evening and this lecture. In Jesus' name, amen. So we will start tonight with a song. Every time we have a lecture, I show you. You see a song. You can sing along if you want to. Usually it's a worship song. Sometimes it's not. It depends. Why do I have all these songs? It's because I like music. I like worship songs in general. But not every song is a worship song. I also use this tool to show you more of the culture of Israel, because most of what I say in our 5-part series of lectures is always about history and about connections in like long term, and sometimes I talk about thousands of years in one night. So I want you to get an understanding of the culture and all these things about Israel that I don't talk about. For example, the feasts. I never talk about the feasts of Israel, although they are actually quite important. I don't say much about the culture of Israel, about the culture of the modern Israel, how things are going on. Like you don't really get a feeling of Israel. I just talk about it, but you're never into it. So through these songs, I try to give you a glimpse of this culture experience. And so I try to take songs from different backgrounds, and I haven't spoken much about the different groups in Israeli society. So most of what I said was the history of the Ashkenazi Jews, especially when I talked about the Shoah that we talked about last week, or about the development of Christianity and Judaism in Europe that I spoke about 2 weeks ago. Most of that was about the Ashkenazi Jews. So most of what you know about Judaism now from these lectures is about Ashkenazi Judaism. But there's a lot more groups. For example, there's the Sephardic Jews. They come from from Spain and Portugal, and then they were doing the pogroms in the Middle Ages. They were also expelled to South America, to the north coast of Africa. So this is the Sephardic people. Ashkenazi people are those from Central Eastern Europe. They had to move to America and Russia. And then there's also Mizrahi Jews who come from the Middle East, which means that their descendants for several generations and hundreds of years live in the Middle East, which is also places like Iraq, for example. So I have an Arabic background, Arabic speaking environment, let's put it this way. And then there's other Jewish groups like Yemenite Jews and so on and so on. So I try to take songs from different cultures so that you get more to see from the different groups of Israelis that we have. And for tonight's lecture, The Modern State of Israel, I thought, which song could I present that that covers at least a time period of what I will talk about tonight. And there's famous songs that all of you might know from Ofra Chaza, for example. Ofra Chaza is a very famous, well-known Israeli singer. She is from Yemenite background. So she's from a smaller group of Jewish groups. She's not Ashkenazi. She's from Yemenite background. And she got famous through the European Song Contest, where she sang for Israel. And she almost won with a song called Chai, which means live. And this is a topic that is often used in Israeli songs. It's about Am Yisrael Chai, which means the people of Israel live. Because this is like the most important thing for Israelis, for Jews. It sounds kind of like a sad thing that they have to always say, we're still alive, we're still alive. You can't kill us. No one could. But somehow it shows the victory, and it shows, look, we're alive and this is what we want. We want to live, we want to have freedom, we want people to live in peace. So they want to live. So Am Yisrael Chai was sung in Munich in Germany, and I think it's very powerful that this song was after the Shoah was sung in Germany, where Ofra Chaza declares, "Look, the Jewish people is alive. You can't kill us." But we're not going to listen to that song, and we're not going to listen to another song of her, for example, that most people of you might know, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, which is Jerusalem of Gold, a very famous song, that became also very famous when Jerusalem was recaptured by the Jews in the Six-Day War. But like we will talk about this tonight. But I'll not show you this song, although all these songs might be very fitting for this time frame that we talk about tonight. But the song that I want to present is a song that actually deals with another topic which we will not talk about tonight. Interesting. Why did I take it? Because so next week we will talk about the modern conflict, the modern war that's going on in Israel. So we will talk about Israel before and after October 7th, 2023. And the song that we will listen to now is a song by Eyal Golan. He's a very famous singer, Mizrahi singer. So from the Middle Ages, from the Middle East. Sorry, his background is from the Middle East. He's Mizrahi Jew, and his song is the song that we will listen to was released right after October 7th. So it was in October 2023 that this song was released, and he also takes parts of the ongoing war, and he reflects on what has happened. But it's not, don't worry, it's not a sad song. It's not a song that reflects on October 7th. No, it's actually a declaration of the victory of the Jewish people, not in a certain war, but just in general. Look, we're still alive. So he repeats over and over again, Am Yisrael Chai, which means the people of Israel live. And it's a song that reflects on the general cry of the people of Israel, their longing, their desperate longing for survival, but not only that, but to live in peace, to live in harmony with their family, with their friends, to live in the land of Israel. And it's a song, and this is why I chose it, it's a song that I think reflects very well the entire time that we cover for tonight's lecture. It's even before the State of Israel was established until nowadays, it's an ongoing struggle from the people of Israel that they really want to survive, they want to live, and they want to prosper. And look how good that works. So we will listen to Eyal Golan's song, and I invite you to not only watch all the pictures, there's quite a lot of pictures that you will see throughout video clips throughout the song, but also to read. There's the Hebrew text and also an English translation in the video. So I invite you to also read and focus on the words and see what he actually talks about. But you can also, if that's too much for you, you can also just relax and enjoy the pictures and see how Israel looks like and how Israel is strong and united and how everyone in Israel tries to help each other and support each other. And you can have in mind that this was a song released in October 2023 that reminded the people of Israel of who they are and what they want, that they want to live together in peace and they want to live. So Am Yisrael Chai by Eyal Golan.
בקרוב תזרח השמש, נדע ימים יפים מאלה, הלב נלחם בדאגות. כולם יחזרו הביתה, נחכה להם למטה, הלוואי נדע בשורות טובות. כי עם הנצח לעולם לא מפחד, אפילו כשקשה לראות. כולם ביחד, אף אחד פה לא בודד, שישרפו המלחמות. עם ישראל חי, אם לא נשכח תמיד להיות מאוחדים. עם ישראל חי, בעליות בירידות, גם בשעות הכי קשות. הקדוש ברוך הוא שומר עלינו, אז מי יכול עלינו? כי אין לנו עוד מדינה. תעשה שלום בינינו, שמור על ילדינו, כי לא אבדה האמונה. עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי. עם ישראל חי. אור ארצי נחלתנו, לא תיפול כעת רוחנו, מסביב ברזל של חרבות. ויונה תפרוס כנפיים, התקווה בת שנות 2000, עוד נצא לשיר ברחובות. כי עם הנצח לעולם לא מפחד, אפילו כשקשה לראות. כולם ביחד, אף אחד פה לא בודד, שישרפו המלחמות. עם ישראל חי, אם לא נשכח תמיד להיות מאוחדים. עם ישראל חי, בעליות בירידות, גם בשעות הכי קשות. הקדוש ברוך הוא שומר עלינו, אז מי יכול עלינו? כי אין לנו עוד מדינה. תעשה שלום בינינו, שמור על ילדינו, כי לא אבדה האמונה. הקדוש ברוך הוא שומר עלינו,
That was the song Am Yisrael Chai by Eyal Golan. It was the song in Hebrew. And as I told you, Eyal Golan is a very famous Israeli musician. He's very, very famous, not only with that song, but also with other songs since years and decades, actually. He's very famous. So this song is heard in Israel everywhere, in the radio and outside, young people, older people. So it's a very famous song. And before we start into our lecture, I quickly want to go with you into the words. Like we want to see a little bit about, talk a little bit about what he sang. So I will read out a few verses, a few phrases shortly, and translate, and then I'll say why. Because I think that they really show what the song is all about, and this is also why I chose the song. So he sings, כי עם הנצח לעולם לא מפחד, אפילו כשקשה לראות. כולם ביחד, אף אחד פה לא בודד, שישרפו המלחמות. And the translation is, because the eternal people, which is the people of Israel, because the eternal people never fear, even when it's hard to see. As you see, this is not just a sentence of, this is not just, he does not only describe reality, but he encourages everyone who listens to that song, look, we don't fear. We cannot be afraid. So he says, the eternal people never fear, even when it's hard to see, because at that moment, October 7th, like everyone was afraid, obviously, and it was visible. We're all together. No one here is alone. Also interesting. It's a statement. Although everyone felt alone, he says, you're not alone. We're together. No one is alone when the wars burns. So it's a direct hint towards October 7th and also other wars. So we will see that the history of Israel is described by many, many wars, and there's lots of that's going on. But it's, as I said, it's an encouragement to let people know we're not alone, and don't forget, we're all together, and we have survived always, so we will survive. And I really like this about the songs of Eyal Golan, you don't have to be very religious. As you can see, he's not so religious, but he uses religious terms and phrases as everyone in Israel, because I think this is very interesting. You know, I live in Germany, and there are many people who claim that they are atheists. And if we discuss about God, they say, look, we're an atheist, so that means I'm an atheist. That means I don't believe that God exists. While in Israel, people, if they claim that they are atheists, they don't believe in God. But no one says that there is no God. They all believe that God exists. They just don't follow religious rules. I think this is interesting because even if you're a very atheist in Israel, you know God exists because you can see it all around. And throughout the history of Israel, you get more and more reflection or an impression of how God really exists and how he has carried you and your family through over thousands of years and over the past 100 years and even over the past 2 years. So you know that God exists. It's a personal thing whether you want to believe in him or not, whether you want to follow certain rules or not and follow certain customs, but everyone knows that God exists. And so Eyal Golan also uses some religious frames here. He says, הקדוש ברוך הוא שומר עלינו, אז מי יכול עלינו? כי אין לנו עוד מדינה. תעשה שלום בינינו, שמור על ילדינו, כי לא אבדה האמונה. So he says, הקדוש ברוך הוא, which is a frame for the Holy One, blessed be he, or something like this. So you, it's a word, it's a terminology of God. So it literally says, the Holy One, blessed be he, but it means God. So God, the Blessed One, he watches over us. So who can triumph over us? So it really says, look, if God is with us, who could be against? Well, this is a quotation from the New Testament, but as I just reframed it. And then he says, because we have no other land. And I think this is very interesting for us to know. Ki en lanu od medina. This is so true. The Jews don't have any other land. We have seen throughout the past lectures that no one in the world wanted the Jews to live with them. Although they integrated perfectly, they blessed the country, no one wanted the Jews. And they all wanted to kick them out of their country. They want them to have their own country. We will see how their own country, Israel, was reestablished and how they lived there, and how everyone wants to fight against them, and how they have to tell themselves, look, we don't have any other options. We have to fight for this land because we don't have any other land in the world. And then he sings, make peace amongst ourselves. So he refers to God. He says, please God, would you make peace amongst ourselves? This is a cry, a plea that they have to have peace, not only with their neighbors, but also amongst themselves. Watch over our children. Look what he sings in his songs, because we haven't lost our faith. So what a beautiful song that blesses the children, that sings about family, that sings about not being alone, that sings about God, how we can trust in him, rely on him. So I think this is a song that that reflects quite well how the feeling, how the situation, the atmosphere was in the beginning of the war. And actually it was the opposite. Everyone felt alone, everyone was afraid, people have lost faith. They were not sure if God is still with them, like all these things. And then his song, which encourages everyone to say, look, we're not alone. God is still with us and he will bless our children. Look, we will see our children live and prosper in this land. They will go to school. They will be happy. We have a family life. And he encourages everyone to hold together and to be one and to not be afraid. So it's a beautiful song that encourages the Israelis in the past 2 years. And it's also an encouragement for the entire history of Israel, as we will see now, because it's actually always the same. You could lose hope if you see what's going on, but then you see how God comes in and changes history, and you realize, wow, it's definitely worth trusting God because he is still there and he blesses his people and he doesn't let them fall. So now we will start with our lecture. As we have talked enough about this song, I invite you to listen to that song again. You can watch it online on YouTube. There's many versions of it. And it showed us a little bit of Israeli life. We might go a little deeper in that next week. But today we will focus on the modern state of Israel. We will talk about the establishment of the state of Israel, and then later the history of Israel, the modern state. So we will talk about roughly the past 100 years. And now I will start. And when I want to start with the modern state of Israel, I have to talk about how the idea of the state of Israel came up. And usually you have to talk about Zionism in this context. And the first name that should come to your mind when you think about Zionism is the name of Theodor Herzl. And this is the guy that we will start with. His name is Theodor Herzl. You'll see a picture of him here. This is him leaning on his balcony in the hotel where he was when he was in Basel in Switzerland during the first Zionist Congress. Okay, why do I take this picture? It's a very famous one. Who was Theodor Herzl? And why do I start with him? Because I actually start with where we stopped 2 weeks ago. Because 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the development of Christianity and Judaism until the beginning of Zionism. So that was where we ended with. And I ended with a question, what does it mean to be a Jew? What is that, being Jewish? Is it being part of a religion? Is it about your ethnicity, in which family you were born? Is it culture? Is it a language? What is it that makes you Jewish? And this question is a question that you can ask yourself until now. But back then, it was a question that was raised. In that time, it was raised very strongly. People asked themselves, who are we? Why are we who we are? And what does it mean to us? What do we have to do? Where do we have to go to? And honestly, the lecture last week about the Shoah, about the Holocaust, was after the development of Christianity and Judaism, but it was also in the middle of what we will talk about today, because we don't go chronologically. I actually continue with where we stopped 2 weeks ago. And then at some point during today's lecture, you have to remind yourselves of what happened, what we talked about last week about the Shoah. Because here we start with 1897, and I will actually go a little further back and give you the context, what led to 1897. So if you've listened to all our lectures, then go back to the end of lecture 2 and recall what I talked about. I ended with the rising of Hasidism, which was a movement in Eastern Europe, a mystic movement of Kabbalah, and it was a religious movement of religious leaders, and it changed Judaism. It had a great impact on it. So until nowadays, we have lots of Hasidic Jews, and most of them you would call ultra-Orthodox Jews. This is what people usually, when people come to Israel, they see Jews, they expect them to all look the same in black and white with these huge hats, and everyone covered and dressed like in the 17 or 1800s. And this is actually where it comes from. So this movement started back then in Eastern Europe, and I spoke a little bit about that. And then I also spoke about the counter movement, like the other movement that was from the Haskalah, which is the Jewish Enlightenment. So there was an enlightenment in Europe, in Central Europe, West Europe going on, and then there was also within Judaism, there was an enlightenment called the Haskalah. Those who followed that were called the Maskilim. And from that was born the Reform Judaism, so that people try to be the opposite, not be more religious and more outstanding and less connected to the world, but they want to do the opposite. They want to be well integrated into society wherever they lived, whether it was Germany or France or wherever they lived. They wanted to be a German or a French, and they wanted to be integrated in society, work in the same jobs, go to same universities, be like on the same level and on the same, like look the same, dress the same, behave the same, everything the same, with the exception of religion, that they would not go to a church, but go to a synagogue. That doesn't mean that they all have to be religious. Most of them were actually not really religious, or like some Christians go to church only on Christmas and Easter, so Jews would only go to synagogue 2 or 3 times a year. So you have all kinds of Jews. And what I'm trying to explain is I open up these 2 fields to let you better understand that there's different developments within Judaism. But it's very important for me to let you know that there's not just 2 groups of Jews. There was way more and everything in between. And it's not right to say all the Hasidic Jews are ultra-Orthodox. Look, there's a difference between Haredi and Hasidic, but I'm not going to go deeper into that. I'm just saying that there's several groups of Jewish movements and people, and yeah. But I just want to let you have an understanding of the time back then. So there was the Hasidic movement, very religious movement to not be connected to the world, but totally be totally separate, have their own their own traditions, their own readings, their own writings, their own books, their own education, their own way of life, their own style. And then on the other hand, there was that type of Jews who wanted to be integrated in society and who wanted to be like everyone else, to assimilate into society. And I ended up with the question, who is a Jew? Because who is a Jew? Is it your... Look, you can be a Jew being Hasidic, and you can be a Jew being assimilated to the world and to the country where you live in. And then a question comes up. Okay, if it's not so much, look, it could be religion, it could be ethnicity, what is it? It could be language, Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino. I didn't speak much about Ladino actually in Yiddish. I didn't really mention. So Yiddish is a mixture between Hebrew and German, while Ladino is a mixture between Hebrew and Spanish. That's like the simple way of explanation. There's more. So there's many Ashkenazi Jews speak Yiddish. So if you speak Yiddish, are you Jewish? Some people would say, look, we're Jewish, but we don't speak Yiddish, so that doesn't count. Then the same question, Hebrew. Do you have to speak Hebrew to be a Jew? No, but it makes you quite Jewish because you understand quite a lot of culture. But again, not everyone who speaks who speaks Hebrew is a Jew, and the other way around. So, what is a Jew? This question becomes very prominent in this time because there were Jews in Germany, Jews in France, Jews in Russia, everywhere, and then there was the country. They served their country, and the question came up: first of all, am I a German? And after that, a Jew, or a father, or a student, or whatever? Or what comes first? Am I more Jewish than I'm German? Or like, how is your nationality and being Jewish? Is being Jewish a nationality or not? And this question comes up in that time because that was the time when many nations in Germany and in Europe became independent in a way that that it became important for them who they were. They made constitutions. There was a lot of change in Europe, and these states became independent. And people thought, who are we? The same question. Germans asked themselves, what makes us German? French people asked themselves, what makes us French? And this question was very prominent back then. And the establishment of these states, these nations, was very important. So the Jews thought at the same time, I am so German, I want to be part of that of Germany. Or I'm so French, I want to be part of France. And other Jews thought, but look, we're not like the others. As we're Jewish, we should have a Jewish state. We should come together as Jews and be independent. And that was exactly where the Zionists came up. So that was the idea. It was a movement in that time that Jews thought about this question, and the first Zionists came up with the idea, let's have a Jewish state. We as Jews should not serve no longer in the German army, French army, and then fight against each other. No, we should be one. We should have a Jewish state. And as every people in this world get their own state, we should also have our own state. So we are a people. So being Jewish means part of one people. So we want to be one people, want to have a land, and a people and land makes a nation. So they want to have a state so that they can be a nation. And then the question came up, where should that be? Obviously not in Europe because everyone was busy there. And they thought, well, let's go to the Middle East. You look back to Israel. But then that could be problematic because many of us don't live there, and it's like a totally other place. It might be conflicts with the Arabs. So Herzl came up and actually liked that idea with going to Uganda. Uganda is in Africa. This is not a joke. they actually really thought they could go to Uganda and establish a state there, a Jewish state, so that no one would be offended. They thought, look, we Jews just want to have a place to live, a place where we can raise our children, be a people in a country, have our own state, be a nation. And where do we not offend everyone? In Uganda. There's enough space, let's go there and let's create a Jewish state. And then the Christians were the ones who came up to the Jews and said, no way, you can't go to Uganda. If there's any place on this earth, you have to go to Israel. Like the only place you can go to is Israel because this is your heritage, this is where you come from. And not only that they said, well, if you have any place, the Christians actually said, very believing Christians, they said, you have to go back to Israel. This is what is written in the scriptures. God has promised to bring you back into your country. So you have to go to Israel and create a Jewish state there. This is where you belong. So the Christians were the ones who were pushing the Jews forward to establish a state, a Jewish state in the ancient land of Israel and have an Israeli state there. So how do you do this? The Jews, the Zionists who had this idea, they said, let's come together, let's have a congress, the first Zionist Congress. They thought about this idea and they made it very, very particular, very straight. Not only, it would be a great dream to have our own nation. No, they actually talked about what do you need? If you want to establish a country, a state, what do you need? And they made very exact lists on what you need and how to buy land, how to do agriculture on that land, and very precise with numbers, and you might think quite German, everything in lists and everything very detailed, and you could see people really thought about that before. And so it was not just a crazy idea, they made it very, very precise. So on this first Zionist Congress in Basel in Switzerland, some people came together, not only Theodor Herzl, he's maybe the most famous, but there's more people, Jabotinsky, Nodal, whatever. Like there's maybe many, many people who led this Zionist movement, people who are who thought about this and brought this idea forth. And actually that was in that time, that was a movement that was slowly going, and Theodor Herzl himself was not really sure whether to do it or not and how important that actually is, until the so-called Dreyfus affair came up. So a French captain, no, how do you say, he was not a soldier, but he had a higher ranking in military, and he was Jewish, a French Jewish person in the military, and there was, so people claimed that he was guilty, although he wasn't. And the only reason why he was called guilty was because he was a Jew. So there was a whole process against him, and a really big thing. It was a scandal in France. And back then, there was many scandals in France, and there was a third one, and it's a big one. It's not just about one small person no one knows. It was a big thing. Everyone knew about that in France. And when Theodor Herzl heard about that, he thought, look, there's no place on earth where a Jew can live in freedom. There's no place on earth where a Jew is treated the same way like the others. If you're Jewish and people know, even if you have a very high ranking in the army, even then, look, everyone knows you serve your country in a very dedicated way. But even if you do that, you're not protected enough. People still see the Jew in you, which makes you someone else from the others, and which gives them they just take the right to treat you different from the others. So when he heard about this affair, that was 3 years, like in 1894, so 3 years before that, when he heard about that Dreyfus affair, he thought, okay, if a Jew is not safe anymore, even if he serves the country in the best way, then we really need a state. So that was the last push that he needed to be very dedicated into the Zionist movement. So they met in Basel, they thought about it, they met a few more times because that was only the first Zionist Congress. There was more gatherings, more meetings, more plans. And important to know is here that while the Western European Jews thought about these plans, it was the Eastern European Jews who actually went to Palestine, how it was called back then, and who moved there, who lived there, and who showed Jewish presence in the land of Israel. Because for the Western Europeans, there was no need to leave their comfortable and beautiful life. They were in universities, they had quite a good life. Okay, there were some problems because they were Jewish, but you could move to another city, you could move somewhere else, as they did for the past 2,000 years. As always, they would move to another place when they had problems. But why should we give up this beautiful life and go to this far away land with malaria, with swamps, with really hard living conditions? As Western Europeans, civilized and with good education, why should you go there and try to live start from the very bottom? You have to start agriculture, you have to establish a society, and then there was no security over there because the Arabs lived there and the Jews who have lived there for 2,000 years and longer. There was always a Jewish presence in the land of Israel. It was just not that high, so there was not many Jews living there. But every Jew who lived there also had problems with the Arabs because the Arabs, they would just steal and kill, and there was not really a secure, safe place. So the Jews thought, the Western European Jews, they had no need to go there, while the Eastern European Jews were poorer than the Western European Jews. They thought, what do we have to lose? What could we lose? Let's go. Whether we live here in poverty or whether we go there and start from scratch doesn't make any difference. So they were actually the ones going. Just interesting for you to know. Okay, now I've showed you how the Jewish inner movement came to the idea of having their own Jewish state. So that was the Zionist movement. Now I'm going to explain what the world, like all the other countries and all the non-Jews, thought about their plans and what they did. So many people say the Jews wanted to have their own country, so they established their own country while everyone was against it. That's not true. As I already said, many Christians were in favor of it, but even more, the whole states, and later we will see the League of Nations even was in favor of that idea. So the next thing I will talk about is the Balfour Declaration. So I have a picture of this now. As it is in English, it's good for you, you can read it. The Balfour Declaration is a letter from the British, I forgot the word, let me check. The British Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, to Lord Rothschild, I don't know how to pronounce that in English. And it's a letter to him, and who is Rothschild? He is the leader of the British Jewish community, and Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, sent him this letter for transmission to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. And in this letter, it's not just a private letter from some person to another person, it's a very official letter. And in this Balfour Declaration, the British Empire promises the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It's quite interesting. We can read this on the right side, and on this letter you can have a closer look and read yourself. I'll quickly read out this one sentence that's important. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. And so on. It also includes the non-Jewish people living in that land, and it also talks about the Jews all over the world who will not be part of this state that was not established yet. So this declaration is in favor of the Jewish Zionist movement, but it's not for them and against everyone else. It's a declaration that was official and it's the first step, and very important to see that that foreign countries, non-Jewish countries, wanted the Zionist movement. They thought it's a very good idea to have this. And I have to talk about the word Palestine here, because I think some people might be confused. Is it Israel? What is Palestine? Where does this name come from? What about the Palestinians? And then I think about the modern conflict and the flag and everything. Okay, let's get a little clarity in that. I explained to you already in the very first and also in the second part of our lectures, lecture series, that the word Palestine comes from the Romans. And I explained to you that the people of Israel lived in the land of Israel 3,000 years ago when King David was there. So there was the kingdom of Israel, and one of their enemies, actually quite a hard enemy, was the Philistines. The Philistines were a Greek people who came from the Mediterranean, from Crete, the island, to the coast of Israel, and they settled in the place that we nowadays call Gaza, in this Gaza Strip area. So they settled there, and they fought against the Israelites, and the Israelites fought against them, and they had quite a lot of battles, and like the Philistines were the big enemy of the Israelites. You might remember David and Goliath. He was also a Philistine, the giant. So they were like famous enemies of Israel. But the Philistines, like every other people around Israel, over time they disappeared. Even great empires like the Roman Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, these big empires, they have their time, and after a while they disappear. And usually you cannot recall who are the descendants of these people, because they have a big empire, then they disappear, they lose power. And even if you're part of a people, even a small people like the Philistines, even them, after a while, they lose power, they get married with all these other peoples, and over time they disappear. So by the time of the Romans being in Israel, the Philistines didn't exist at all anymore, only in legend. So when people read the Bible from old books, from history, they knew about the Philistines, but they didn't exist anymore. And the Romans, who after they defeated the Israelites, and after they destroyed everything, they burnt the temple. There were lots of Jewish riots afterwards. And after the last riot in 135, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, they changed everything. They wanted to put a great punishment on the Jews, and they called the land of Israel, that was back then actually called Judea, Samaria, Galilee, after the Judeans who lived there, Samaritans who lived there, in the area of Galilee, of the Sea of Galilee. They called this area Palestine, because they thought about the Philistines, the great enemies of the Jews from back then, and they want to refer to them to really put a great punishment on Israel, so that the name of Israel would be erased from history. So they also renamed the city of Jerusalem, the city of peace. Shalom is peace, they called this Aelia Capitolina, which means the captured city. So this beautiful city of Jerusalem was called the captured city, and the beautiful land of Israel was called Palestine, remembering the Philistines who didn't exist anymore, only to slap the Jews in their face and to let them see, look, we brought up the biggest enemy you could ever think of, and only to really punish them and let them feel that they've lost this war, and to erase the name of Israel. That was the only reason. So over time, the land was, from time to time, was called Palestine. Sometimes it was not so important because other people were there. And by this time, I didn't mention this, sorry. By this time, there was the Ottoman Empire. So over time, the land of Israel, after the Romans, there was several people there. With the rise of Islam, there was also Muslim groups. Then the Crusades came, and so there was Christian groups, Muslim groups, and still Jews who lived there, but never really had power over them. So it was a mixture. And then by this time, now that we talk about the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Ottoman Empire was ruling there. So it was a Muslim empire, and this area was called Palestine. Like, not so officially from the Ottomans used, they had their own words, but people would call this area Palestine, and people knew what it was. The Palestinians were everyone who lived there, which includes a lot of Jews. So back then, a Jew would say, I'm a Palestinian Jew. And nowadays, people claim this word Palestinian for themselves. They claim to be a people, the Palestinian people. That doesn't exist. It's an invention of the 1960s, only from propaganda and ideology to have something else against the Jews. So they created a people called Palestinians because of that name, Palestine, but there was never a land of Palestine. There was never a people of Palestine. And those who are the real Palestinians are the Philistinians. And they don't exist since 3,000 years anymore. And those descendants, like those people who say that they are Palestinians now, they're not the descendants of the Philistines, obviously, and they know this, and they wouldn't claim that they are the descendants of them. So you see that it's a random name, the Palestinians, this people. It's not a people, but it's a random, brought up propaganda ideology name. For a people that is not a people, for a group of people who actually belong somewhere else, to Jordan and to other Arab countries. And we will see how this problem was already created by Europeans. But just to not confuse you with the word Palestine, so this is the description of the area. It's a term for this area in which is Israel. So in the Balfour Declaration, the British Empire promises, out of free will, there was no need to it. Well, they got some great profit from Jews in their own country, and in general, because the Jews they had lots of inventions, and they were really good at certain things. So the countries where the Jews lived in profited from Jewish presence in their country, from Jewish inventions. And at some point, the British Empire thought, let's give the Jews something back. We think it's a good idea to have the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So that was the Balfour Declaration, 1917. A few years later, 1920, was the San Remo Conference. We are in the middle of World War I. World War I was, on one hand, you had Germany, who was together with the Ottoman Empire and other nations, and on the other hand, you had the British Empire and France and others. I only mention them because they are important for us now. So who lost the First World War? We know Germany lost, and also everyone, all its allies. So also the Ottoman Empire lost. That means that the Ottoman Empire by that time lost a lot of their territories and much was taken away from them. So now what we have left over from the Ottoman Empire is basically Turkey, which is very small compared to what the Ottoman Empire used to be. So when the British Empire promised a national home for the Jewish people to Rothschild and the entire Jews, he did that in the middle of the war, knowing that the Jews would help them, especially the Jews in Palestine would help the British fighting there against the Ottoman, against Arab people living there. Actually, I have to be more precise because the Ottoman Empire, that was like Turkish people, while the Arab people were not the same as the Turkish people. So they also fought against each other, but as it always with a war, you try to find some allies. You try to find people who would fight with you. So that was also a promise because they thought, look, then the British would get some support from the Jews if they promised them something. By the way, at the same time, they also promised something to the Arabs, their own state, so that the Arabs would also help them. Later, we will see how much that brings them into trouble. But okay, back then, the British thought that the Jews would help them in the war. So and they also did. So later, after the war was finished and the Ottoman Empire has lost, they lost many of the territories, and the winning side, the winning allies, talked about what to do with these territories from the Ottoman Empire that they have conquered. So in 1920, they came together in the San Remo Conference. So there was a conference in San Remo in Italy. And there are different states like Italy and France and Japan and the British came together and they discussed the allocation of League of Nations mandates for the administration of Ottoman territories. So those territories who would no longer belong to the Ottoman Empire because it wouldn't exist anymore, they split them into mandates, and certain countries would have the hand over that territory, so they would get a mandate in these areas. So why is that San Remo conference important? Because it talks about three very important areas in the Middle East, which is Syria and Lebanon, Palestine, which is today Israel and Palestine, Israel and Jordan, and the third is Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq. So we talk about these areas, and while Lebanon and Syria, so Syria was given to France, Mesopotamia and Palestine were given to the British. And in this conference, the Balfour Declaration becomes legally binding under international law. So the Balfour Declaration, with a Jewish homeland, the place where the Jews would have their own state, now becomes legally binding under international law. And even further, 2 years later, in 1922, the League of Nations recognized the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine. So they realized the Jews belong here. This is their heritage. This is where they come from. This is where all the history took place. They belong here. And they recognized the reasons for the restoration of their national home in that very land. So they knew that there is a reason for restoring their national home there. It's because of history, it's because of what they see, how the Jews are connected to this land, and the Jews and no one else. And through that, they legitimized the San Remo resolution, so what they decided on the San Remo conference. And they granted the British a mandate for Palestine. So in San Remo conference, they only thought about what to do. Like they already had like a pre-discussion, but it was a resolution. It was not just people talking. It was a resolution, but it was it was only those allies who had the victory, talking about this. But later, the League of Nations, which is, so nowadays we have the UN, the United Nations. Back then, there was no UN, there was only the League of Nations. So it was basically what we had before the UN. So the League of Nations approved the Sanremo resolution and said, okay, British, you'll get a mandate for Palestine. So this is very important because we see that here the League of Nations, not just someone, not only the British Empire, it was the League of Nations, the whole world basically, decided here should be a Jewish state. And where exactly? So I brought you a map. This is the area of the territory of Palestine, of the mandate. So this blue color. I know this map is in German. I'm sorry, but I think you will still understand Palestina is Palestine. And then the other, Egyptian is Egypt, and Mittelmeer is the Mediterranean. And then you see Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. So this is, and Saudi Arabia. So these are the neighboring countries as we have them now. As I said, Iraq was Mesopotamia, Lebanon, Syria was Syria. So only the blue area is important for us. And as I said already, the blue area is what we call nowadays Israel and Jordan. But all of that was Palestine back then, the mandate Palestine, and that was given to the British in order to establish a Jewish homeland there, so that the Jews would have a country for themselves. So the League of Nations decided it was not a Jewish idea. Well, maybe the idea was Jewish, but the League of Nations said, we think this is a good idea. And for me, it's very important to let you see that this was long before the Shoah. We're in 1922. That was long before Second World War, long before the Nazis came up, long before the Shoah happened, the Holocaust. That was a decision that was independent from the Holocaust. It was a decision that was made by the League of Nations back then because they saw how important that is to have a Jewish state. And it was not because, oh, the Jews suffer so much, we have to give them a state. It was their decision freely without the Shoah. So this is important for me to mention so that you understand, because some people claim, look, there was the Shoah, and this is why Israel got a state. This is not really true because the idea of having a state was there long before, not only by the Jews, but also, as I said, the nations decided and they made very concrete plans about it. And this is the territory of where this should take place. So you think, oh, so they should have created a Jewish state in all of this area, like Israel and Jordan. All of this area should be Israel, like the state of Israel, the Jewish place. Yeah, why not? That was actually what was given to them. But I mentioned beforehand that the British also promised the Arabs some land and an independent state and so on. So we see what happened just a few years later. Actually, same year, just a few years later after the Sanremo conference. In 1922, when the League of Nations has just said, okay, this is here, the British will get the mandate. In the same year, the British separated 77% of their mandate Palestine and named it Transjordan. Trans is Latin and means like on the other side, while cis is on this side. So there's Cisjordan, as some people call it, and Transjordan on the other side of the Jordan River. This is where it got its name from. The Jordan River is, on this map, as you can see at the moment, is the western line of the thick black line of the blue territory. I hope this was not too complicated too. So it's like in the middle of the map. You'll see that's the Jordan River. It goes from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea. And then actually, yeah, you follow that line until Eilat, where's the city of Eilat now, is the border to Egypt. And this border is, this is where they had the border then. And so they called every area on the eastern side of that border Transjordan. And as I said, they cut it off from their mandate, Palestine, named it Transjordan, and they not only gave them a new name, this became an autonomous, Jew-free region for Palestinian Arabs. So that means all the Jews who lived there, and there were quite a few Jews living there, they were expelled. They were no longer allowed to live there. They had to flee. They had to leave their houses. Many of them were killed and were persecuted, and so on. So they had to leave this area. So they made it a Jew-free area. For me as a German, it's hard to say this word because the Nazis used the same words to clean areas from Jews later. So this is already what the Arabs have done before. So they cleaned, you could say this, they cleared this area from Jews, and that became an independent state, not state yet, but here only an area, but later it became a state, and it was for Palestinian Arabs. So you could say, okay, let's put it this way, all the Jews go to the blue area, in this map, blue area, and all the Arabs go to the Transjordan area on the western side. So, on the eastern side. So we have two separate states. We have a Jewish state, we have an Arab state. That would be a fair solution, having a Palestinian Arab state called Transjordan and having a Jewish state called Israel. But that's not how it worked. They just cut off 77% of Palestine, made it Jew-free, and gave the Palestinians a place where they could later establish their own state, Palestinian Arabs. And on the other side, they did not establish a state for the Jews, and they did not even kick out the Palestinian Arabs from that area. So they did not do an ethnic separation. They only did an ethnic cleansing against the Jews, while on the other side, Jews and Palestinian Arabs had to live together. And there was a lot of clashes, a lot of riots, a lot of rumor, like there was a lot of fight going on, and the British really had problems with that. But they were in power, and they got they had to establish a Jewish home for the Jews there. They had to establish a state, basically. And a mandate is the administration over an area until things have settled and people will have their own, will establish their own state, as we will see in all the other places. Syria became independent. Iraq was established. Jordan later. Lebanon. What about Israel? The British did not do what they were called to do. And as I said, the Palestinian Arabs got their place, got their country, got their land, their country, their state, while the Jews didn't get anything. And the mandate, the British mandate, was about to expire when in 1947, the UN thought about a solution for that problem and created the UN Partition Plan. That was, it sounds quite official, UN Partition Plan, but it's an idea. It is not a resolution that is made so that it's legally binding. It's just an idea. And I'm sorry for these words, but as someone we have just spoken about the Shoah last week, and there was, the Nazis spoke about the solution for the Jewish problem and terms and terminology like this, and this would go on. So there was the Second World War in between. Jews were crucially murdered in concentration camps and were rejected by the British when they tried to enter the land of Israel, which was not a state back then. It was the British mandate. The Jews had no chance, no other options where to go. They were in Europe. No matter to which country they fled, the Nazis would come, they would be put into the concentration camps. So the Jews had to flee. Some went to the United States, some went to Russia far away, and some people thought, okay, now maybe it's time for the Zionist movement. They were not so. I think many of them did not do that because of the Zionist idea. They just did it because they had to survive. They had no other chance where to go, so they decided, let's go to Palestine, to the British Mandate, to the land of Israel. Let's go there and find shelter and rescue. But do you know what the British did? They did not let the Jews enter because they didn't want to have more riots with the Arabs. There was an ongoing conflict between Jewish and Arab people living there, and the British didn't want to have more problems, as if this is a problem having Jewish people in your country. So they sent the Jews right back to Hamburg, and from there to the concentration camps of the Nazis. So the British knew what the Germans would do with the Jews, but they didn't care. And then after war ended in 1945, and many concentration camps were rescued by the Allies, the Americans and Russians, and so on, and they saw what the Nazis did to the Jews. Then many people thought, wow, the Jews really need their own state. As this idea was there on the table already since decades, and they should have done it, but the British didn't, and even until then they haven't done it, and the war was over and they still didn't do it. And then the UN had an idea: let's divide the land that is left over. You see on the right side, you already have Jordan, which became already their own country, and now this 23% that were left from the actual Palestinian mandate, the mandate of Palestine for the British, this small area should now be divided again into a Jewish and an Arabic state. So that's the idea behind the UN partition plan. But first of all, it's unfair because the Palestinian Arabs already got their country. Second, it's unfair because the white area here should be given to the Jews, while the gray area should be given to the Arabs. And if you want to establish a country, look, the gray area, no problem, because you have friends around you. Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, they're all Arabs. But for the Jews, who are hated by Arabs, you would give them this white area, which you cannot defend at all. It's a very small strip next to the Mediterranean, a few kilometers only. How can you defend a country like this if they all invade? And they will, as we will see. It's incredible. And then this big area where you can see Negev and Beersheba, this is the area in the south. And you might see, look, the Jews got quite a big amount of land. This is desert. Negev is a desert. There's nothing, only sand and stone. And you can't build cities there because it's so hot. Beersheba is the city in the south, like in the most south, that you can still live in, and then only Eilat in the very, very south where you can live again because there's water. And in between, well, a few villages, like small tents, and from people who live there with their camels or whatever. But it's not an area where you can build cities. It's just too hot. So it's the desert. So you would give the Jews the desert, while all the good land, the gray lands, where you can see Hebron and Nablus, these are areas for, this should be for the Arabs, which is not fair, again, because this is Jewish homeland. As you might remember from the very first lecture, we talked about the patriarchs. So we talked about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We talked about David. We talked about all these important people for the Jewish people. And all of them lived in this area that is here gray. So that was planned to be given to the Arabs, while Israel, like the Jews, they should get areas like Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv was established in 1909, so it was there's no Jewish history connected to that modern city. Well, I understand many Jews lived in the coastal area, but they had to because the Arabs would fight them in the other areas. So it's not fair in any way for the Jews to accept this partition plan. But still, they did. They said, "Okay, we will accept this area because we will accept this plan because we have no other chance, whether this or nothing. So we take this." So the Jews agreed, while the Arabs disagreed. They didn't want this. Why? They got all the best parts. They got another country. No, they disagreed because that means that Israel would have a state, and they don't want Israel to exist. The state of Israel should not exist. The Jews should not be there. They wanted 100%. And that's the problem. Israel would say, even if you give us only 1%, we will take whatever you give us, just so that we have a place. While, remember, they even said Uganda was fine. So, but now here in the Holy Land, land of Israel, they accepted whatever you would give them, even the desert, even places on the coast that are not for them. While the Arabs did not agree because they want to have everything. No Jews should live there. And that's the problem, and that created the problem. So there was more and more riots, there were more and more fightings going on. And right before the British would leave this area and would be finished with their mandate, on the 15th of May 1948, they would leave the country and they would say, Jews and Arabs, kill yourselves. I don't care. Like, let's go. So they would leave the country. They wouldn't care anymore. So that's why on the 14th of May 1948, so the day before the British would leave, Israel declares the establishment of the State of Israel. So there's David Ben-Gurion. This is the man on the picture who stands in the middle. He declares in the Declaration of Independence the establishment of the State of Israel. And as you can see in this room, there's a picture of Theodor Herzl right on top of him. So he goes along with the Zionist idea. There's two flags with a Star of David and a blue stripe. This is a black-white picture, so you can't see it, but it was blue, like the modern flag of Israel. And there was already the idea, look, the flag is connected to the Talit, the prayer shawl, the Jewish prayer shawl, where you have, it's white and has blue stripes. And because the Bible tells us how to have on the tzitzit, which is on the ends of your garment, you should have the blue fabric between the white. So it's according to the Jewish prayer shawl, the Talit, they chose the flag, which should be white with blue stripes, and then the Star of David as a symbol for the Jewish state. There were more Jewish symbols that were in discussion on what to put on the flag. For example, the menorah, which is a lamp with 7 arms, is also described in the Bible. It was in the temple, and this became now for the seal, whenever they had to seal anything for the state of Israel, and it was also on the coin, on the shekels coin, on the 10 agorot, which is like the cents of the Jewish. The Israeli money has shekels, like we have euros, and then the small ones are called agorot, and this is where the menorah is on. And then the third option was the Lion of Judah, which is also a very prominent motive from the Old Testament, with the Lion of Judah on it, and this became now part of the flag from Jerusalem. So the Star of David was put on the flag. Just a little history background why this how the flag of Israel was actually made. So they decided for the Star of David as a Jewish symbol on the flag, and everything in blue and white. So David Ben-Gurion declares in the Declaration of Independence the establishment of a State of Israel, and he did not say because God has given us this land, and because our forefathers lived here, and because there's no other reason why anyone else should live here, only us, and God has given us this land, and it's a holy thing that we do, and we just fulfill prophecy. This is why we established the state of Israel. No, he did not say this. He did not say this. But it was the other way around. He said, by virtue of our natural and historic right, and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, I hereby declare the establishment of the State of Israel. He was actually secular. He was not so religious, as many of those from the first hours of Israel. Many of them were not religious, and they didn't do it out of religious motives. They did it because the United Nations, the League of Nations back then, gave them the right to do it. And they only did what was allowed to them and what they got the right for. And it was not a spiritual right given to them from God. At least they didn't claim it that way. They said, look, all the other nations gave us the right to establish a state, and this is what we'll do. And this is important for me to mention, because some people say, look, the Jews only wanted to have a state, and they only claim that they can have the state because God gives them the state and because of the Bible. But look, the Bible, only religious people believe in it. It's not true. It's not this way. If people say that the Jews established a state of Israel out of religious reasons, I have to tell you, look here, it was as he says, the natural and historic right and the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly that gave them the right to establish the State of Israel. And David Ben-Gurion himself was not religious, he was very secular. And other people as well. So of course, Jewish and Christian religious people would frame it that way. Even I would say, look, God gave them the ability to establish the State of Israel, and it is a fulfillment of prophecy, and it is. But in their Declaration of Independence, it doesn't say anything about God, but it shows to the world very clearly that it is a right for the Jewish people to have their own state without any religious reasons. And now another question, why is David Ben-Gurion doing that? Who is he? How does he come into that position? So before there was the State of Israel, there was already quite a lot of Jews who lived in that country. There were always Jews who lived in that country, but many of them were, the minority and was poor people. Some of them were also wealthy, but whoever was in power there took a lot of taxes, and so they actually had to stay in poverty. But when more and more Jews came, long before the establishment of State of Israel, the Jews who had the Zionist idea of coming back to the land, and I told you most of them were Eastern European Jews, not all of them, but many. So when they came, they somehow had to organize how to live there. So there was the Jewish Agency, which was in charge of many of these Jewish how do I say this? So it was like a government before you had a government. So they dealt with all the Jewish problems and Jewish things that had to be sorted. So the Jewish Agency did that, and the head of the Jewish Agency was David Ben-Gurion. So he was also the one who declared the establishment of the State of Israel. So before there was a government, because there was no State of Israel yet, there was something like government who took care of everything that had to be done for the Jews, and that was the Jewish Agency. And the British also worked together with the Jewish Agency. So whenever they had a question or they had to talk to the Jewish civilization there, society, they spoke with the Jewish Agency. And then there was also two other organizations, Keren HaYesod and the Jewish National Fund, Keren Kayemet L'Israel. So they bought land, they thought about agricultural stuff, they made all these things very practical and possible. And they exist until nowadays. So the Jewish Agency was quite important before the establishment of State of Israel, and until now is very important. And this is where David Ben-Gurion comes from, and this is why he was the one who declared the independence of Israel. And as you could imagine, right with the establishment of the State of Israel, when the British left the country, in that night, a war started. Israel, this very young country that was just established, was just 1 day old, not even, was already surrounded by 5 enemy countries who had only one goal: to erase Israel from the map so that Israel would not exist. When David Ben-Gurion declared the independence, he declared that on the land of Palestine, the mandate of Palestine that was given to the British, so you could say actually all of the 100% belong to them, but Jordan was already cut off. Transjordan Jordan was already cut off, so the rest that was left over, the Arabs didn't agree, so they didn't take their part. So Ben-Gurion took the other part. Some people might think now that okay, if Israel agreed to the partition plan, then they agreed to these areas and they became theirs, and the other part was is to no one because the Arabs didn't claim that land. It did not really work that way, because the partition plan was only an idea that was given. Israel agreed, but if the Arabs don't agree, what do you have? Israel just established a state of Israel over this area. So that means all of that actually belonged to them, but in fact, not all of them was under their control. Only what was actually Jewish areas, and although they declared the independence of Israel, they had to fight. In the same night, a war started while the 5 neighboring countries declared a war against Israel, and the entire Arabic background, so all the nations around the neighboring nations, were against the State of Israel and joined the war. So we had a military conflict between the neighboring countries against Israel, and then the support of other Arab countries to these Arab countries. So everyone was against the State of Israel, which is quite an unfair fight. And again, it's a fight like David against Goliath. And I think it's not a coincidence that David Ben-Gurion is called that way, and then he had his own David against Goliath war. And that was the Independence War. And what a surprise. It's actually impossible. This is some of these moments where you think in Israeli history, wait, God has to have his finger on this, otherwise it wouldn't work out that way. Although Israel was in the minority, although Israel was, many of them have just come back from the concentration camps. Some of them have some military experience. There was other organizations. There was Haganah and Etz Lehi. There was different military organizations before. There were underground fighters who had to protect themselves and the Jewish society against the Arabs before. So there were only a few military trained people, but there was not really an army yet. Was not really organized. While all the other countries had organized armies, they had a lot of tanks, a lot of power, like a lot of soldiers. And after that war, you might think Israel would not survive a day or two, but Israel actually won that war. And I'm going to show you a map now of how the territories looked like. So on the left side, you see the UN partition plan. That's the map that we know already. On the right side, you see how it was in 1948 after this war, after the War of Independence. So Israel won that war, and Israel won not only the area, the white area I showed you, that is really hard to defend. The miracle happened. Israel could not only defend this area, but also win more parts, and is now in all of that, which is white on the right side, on the right map. This is now Israel, while Gaza Strip, was under Egyptian control, and the West Bank was occupied by Jordan and was then under Jordanian control. So if you think, what about these areas that were gray on the partition plan? After the war, as I said, the partition plan is only an idea. After the war, it looked that way. So look on the right map, because the right map is actually a map that shows you the truth. The left map, the partition plan, is only an idea, a wish, but it never looked that way. Maybe only on the night of the 14th of May, 1948. But in 1949, after the war, this is how the area in Israel looked like. So the state of Israel was everything that you see in white color. And as I said, Gaza Strip under Egyptian control, and the West Bank occupied by Jordan. So everything settled. No Arab Palestinian state. The Arabs said no to the UN partition plan, so they didn't get a state. That's how it is. And then coming later and say, but we actually wanted to have a state. You didn't give us one. Well, there was an offer. You didn't accept the offer. So there was a war. And all the Palestinian Arabs who wanted to have a state actually have their state in Jordan and this area that was occupied by Jordan, the West Bank. So this is how it looked like in 1948. And it was not, so the war ended, but there was not peace. The problem is, if you just stop fighting, that doesn't create peace. So the neighboring countries never recognized the state of Israel. They only stopped fighting. So if you stop fighting, that doesn't mean that you have peace, and that doesn't mean that you acknowledge the borders that you have. And looking up that word, armistice. That's the word I was looking for. So there was no peace, but only armistice. So there was no fighting, but the neighboring countries do not recognize the state of Israel yet. Some countries don't do until nowadays, but some do. So, but many other countries recognize the state of Israel. So Israel is a state, as we can see, and but that doesn't mean that the war is over. Now Israel can live and everything is peace. We will see that the history of Israel is basically an ongoing war. It's after one war, around 10 years later, the next war, around 10 years later, the next war. So it's an ongoing conflict. And the story actually repeats itself over and over again. I'm showing you now a list of wars. It's actually not a complete list. There's more, like in between, there was more. But I just show you the most important wars. So we see in 1948-49, actually already starting in 1947, was the Independence War of Israel. Israel had basically no chances to win, but did. Israel won. And then there was, in 1956-57, there was a Suez Crisis, which, look, Egypt didn't want to give Israel the chance to have access with their ships to a Suez Canal. So there was a big crisis that was not only, it was actually, and you will see here, it's not only about Israel, it's also about European countries and other countries in the world getting involved in that issue, because the Middle East is a place where a lot of trade happens and a lot of economic interests meet. So Egypt went into a demilitarized zone, asked the UN troops to leave the area towards at the border of Israel. At the same time, Syria comes to the Golan Heights with military, and Lebanon. Look, many military armies around Israel come up and prepare for war. So what does Israel do in the 6-day war? They do the first step. They go and attack first. So people sometimes say, Israel has started the 6-day war. That's true, but it's not because Israel wanted that war. It's because the other countries have prepared for war beforehand. What should Israel do? Wait until these countries attack Israel? No, Israel had to defend itself, so that's why they started. And as always, there's an alliance between the United States, France, Israel, the British. Like there's more interest. It's not only Israel against Arab countries. It's always Israel and the West, basically. Israel and the West against Arab countries. So we'll see every single one has their own story, but you can see a pattern, a certain pattern, whether it is other countries preparing for war and Israel has to do the first step in order to prevent its own country from dying out, or it's a war like the Yom Kippur War in 1973, where Israel was hardly attacked by other countries. So Yom Kippur, now I have to share a little bit about Jewish feasts and Jewish culture. Yom Kippur is the highest fasting day in the Jewish calendar. So within Judaism, there's the holiest day of the year, if you so want, is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It's the day when the people of Israel, the Jewish people, come before God and all their sins will be forgiven by God. So it's a very holy day. All of the Jewish people fast and pray all day long, 25 hours. They do not eat, do not drink, walk around in white clothes, do not use their phone or anything. And even secular people would do this. So it's like the Christmas and Easter event for the Christians. That's the Yom Kippur for the Jews. It's a very holy, very sacred day. It's even if you're not religious, but you have some respect towards something higher above you, God, you would at least not drive on that day, at least not have a big feast or a big meal. Even if you don't fast, you would not eat much because you have respect and you know it's the day when God wants to come and restore the relationship between him and his people. So Yom Kippur was the day of atonement, the day when the Jewish people repent and God forgives them all their sins. So it's a very holy day. It's a very important day in Jewish culture. It's the most important day. And the Arab countries know that. So they just used that day to attack Israel from all sides. So Israel, as most Jews don't use their phone on Yom Kippur, was surprised by this attack. They didn't know that it was coming. It was not like the 6-day war when they could see things coming. It was so suddenly, everyone was surprised. No one thought this would come now. And as everyone was fasting and praying, they were not in physical strength to fight. And there was not, usually you have soldiers somewhere ready to fight. They were really unorganized. They really had to get ready for this fight. And within a few days, they had lots of losses because the Yom Kippur War hit them out of nothing. And you see, I told you it's a pattern of these wars in Israel. Whether Israel is, there's other countries who are about to attack Israel and Israel has to do the first step, or the other countries actually attack Israel right in its back, and Israel is in the middle of a war that it never saw coming and never wanted to have. So there's lots of wars, and the most important. So I have this picture here of the 6-day war. It's a very famous picture because in the 6-day war, although Israel was Israel was surrounded by all these countries who fought against Israel. Israel won a lots of territory in that war. Israel could conquer the Golan Heights in the north, also East Jerusalem. Jerusalem was divided until then. Jews could not go to the Temple Mount. They could not go to the Old City. They had to live in West Jerusalem, while all the heritage in the actual Jerusalem, the Old City, was under Arab control, and they could not enter. So in the 6-day war, for the first time, they conquered East Jerusalem, and Jews could go to the Western Wall, the Waving Wall, the wall where they pray, the Western Wall from the Temple Mount area. And this is a picture that was taken right after the moment when the first soldiers came there and saw the Western Wall. So this is a picture. They've just come there and conquered this area, and they stand in awe like, wow, this is the Western Wall of the temple. We have come here now. For generations we have waited for that. Now we're here. So this is a very famous picture from the 6-day war. And Israel got a lot of territories, as I said, Golan Heights and East Jerusalem, and also the West Bank, so-called West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria, and actually the entire Sinai Peninsula. That was a huge thing. So Israel gained a lot of territories, and after this big victory, Israel had the probably most traumatic experience just a few years after when the Yom Kippur War started. So on their highest holiday, they were attacked, and Israel might have thought, look, we can do everything with only 6 days. We win so much territory, and then later when they had the Yom Kippur War, they realized, wow, we're not that strong. Or let's put it this way, we're still depending on higher power. We can't do it ourselves. And this is actually a pattern that we see throughout history, that the Arab countries try to attack Israel on very holy days. So whenever Israel is celebrating a feast, you don't know whether an attack might come soon or not. Because on Yom Kippur, everyone knows whenever Yom Kippur takes place, people think of that one Yom Kippur 1973 when all the Arab countries attacked Israel. I lived in Halle when on Yom Kippur, someone entered the synagogue and wanted to enter the synagogue and wanted to kill all the Jews here in Germany. But thanks God, this door somehow didn't open, and unfortunately, he shot 2 other people outside of the synagogue. But it's again on a holiday. Then the last war, the October 7th, took place on Simchat Torah. It's also a feast for celebrating the Torah on the end of Sukkot. So again, it is on a holiday when the attack of the Hamas happened, the massacre, when they came from Gaza and slaughtered so many Jews and raped and took hostage. So that was also on a holiday. And then also remember, just last year, Hanukkah, Bondi Beach in Australia. Again and again and again, Jews are attacked on these holidays, and I think it's a strategy of the enemy to try to make a memory for the Jews that on every single holiday, when they actually celebrate something from the Bible or something from their history, something religious, the enemy tries to give them another memory of fear and war and attack. So we see this as a pattern over and over again. So I will summarize this. Whether other countries prepared for a war and Israel had no other chance but to attack first, or other countries attacked Israel right in the back and when they didn't expected it. Often it happens on holidays, Jewish religious holidays. So we see this pattern over and over again. And we see that almost every 10 years, sometimes even less than 10 years, another really war breaks out. But that doesn't mean that in between there's peace. Usually there's a Cold War, there's other riots, conflicts going on. So living in Israel is like the whole history is a struggle of survival. And we see that every single war that Israel fights is a war of existence. Because, as I said beforehand, Israel just wants to live, while all the other countries, Arab countries and terrorist organizations that we deal with, terrorist organizations try to kill all the Jews, try to wipe out Israel from the map, try to destroy Israel at all. So they want to take away the existence of Israel. So for Israel, every war is a war of existence. They have to fight for their lives, because as we've heard in the song from Eyal Golan in the beginning, En lanu od medina, we don't have any other country. There's no other place where they could go to. It's not that Israel could say, okay, we lost this war, no problem. A part of our country is not ours anymore, no problem, let's go on. Israel is such a tiny little country. If they lose any square meter, they lose. And they cannot lose anything. And they know that if a war takes place, because Israel is so small, it's always on their territory. So they try to push the war out of their borders on the territory of the other countries, because they cannot, if it's always on their own territory, Israel would not survive. And by the way, Israel is not only Jewish people. There's many other minorities living in Israel. There's lots of Muslim people as well living in Israel, Arab people. So Israel does not only face wars from the outside, but also from the inside, when terrorists from the inside come. So people who, whether they have an Israeli passport or not, but they're against the state of Israel. So Israel faces threats from everywhere. But there's also a huge amount of minorities who love Israel, who support Israel, so they live in Israel, and they, although they're not Jewish, they support. So we see that Israel is trying to have peace with all minorities within their country, trying to have peace with other countries, but other countries do not want to have peace. There's terrorist organizations who don't want to have peace. And not only that, they want to erase Israel from the map. So we have this pattern of Israel trying to survive, while other countries have only one goal: to destroy Israel and to erase it from the map. So let's go a little further in history. It's not only about wars; it's also about the longing for peace. So in 1977, Camp David Accords took place. So that was a trying to have some peace, and later we will see since 1993, the Oslo Accords, it was again trying to create peace. So there was also a way of trying to make peace happen, but we see why it doesn't work, because over and over again, any treatment, any agreement is ripped in pieces by the next attack from any other country, from any terror organization against Israel. So Israel can agree to whatever they want. They can do as much as they want. If the other side doesn't want peace, you can't have peace. So then we had the First Lebanon War, Second Lebanon War, First Intifada, Second Intifada. It was again and again and again, over and over again, wherever Israel stood, whatever Israel tried to do, how often, no matter how often Israel reached out its hand to its enemies, saying, please, let's have peace. Even if they agreed, they would fall in the back of Israel. They would slap Israel in the face and show them that they hate Israel. So Israel is really struggling with that. Israel is trying to have peace, but it's how could you reach peace in with enemies who have only one goal: to kill you, to erase you from the map. And Israel is going, as we've seen, from one pogrom to the next. In the Middle Ages already, actually way before then, when other countries came and tried to invade Israel when there was still a kingdom. And then later other rulers over Israel. Then in the Middle Ages, when the people of Israel were spread all over the world, the countries didn't want to have them in their own country, so they expelled them. They had to flee from one place to the next. So finally, now they have their own state, but even that is not recognized by some states, although Israel was given the right to have a state. And then it's attacked over and over again. So it's a story of ongoing fight of survival, but Israel still exists. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons or proofs to see that God exists, because God has promised that he will hold his hand over Israel and will protect Israel. And the fact that Israel still exists shows us, look, there's God is there. And even if you're not religious, you could still say it's a miracle. The fact that Israel exists is a miracle, and the fact that the Jewish people exist and prosper and have great inventions in high tech, in so many areas in the world. They invent so many things. They are the Nobel Prize winners. It's incredible what Israel does, and not only that Israel survived, but that Israel is where it is, one of the leading countries in the world. It's incredible. So it's a miracle, and the fact that Israel still is here shows us how indefeatable Israel is. And I ended here on this list with the 2006 Second Lebanon War. That doesn't mean that since 2006 there's no war. It just means that from that time on, I will talk about this time from 2006 on next week. So next week we will go more into detail about the very recent things taking place in Israel and conflicts that are happening, and especially the ongoing war at the moment that started on the 7th of October with the massacre of Hamas, 2023. So this doesn't mean that this is the end of the wars. I'm just saying that you can see there's a list of wars, and you can see that there's an ongoing fight, and you can see certain patterns that took place. But you see Israel tries to reach out its hand for peace, but it will never get peace because of the other countries who don't want peace, because of terrorist organizations who have only one goal: to erase Israel from the map, and because of everyone who hates Israel and who makes life really hard for Israel. But still, Israel lives, Israel survives, and Israel exists and flourishes and prospers, and this is beautiful to see. So I'm ending with a verse from the Bible. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It's written in the Psalms, and I believe this should be an encouragement for every one of us to pray for peace of Jerusalem, because we see that Israel is really having a hard time with all these wars, and I think our prayer and support is needed. But not only prayer, but also support, because I believe that we have a voice, and we have power to support Israel. And as we learn in this series of lectures about Israel, we see how Israel is really doing all its best. But although it gets all the international right to exist, still people until nowadays ask why Israel actually exists, and it takes away the right of existence from Israel. And this is not fair, and this is why I think we have to stand up and support Israel. So I'm giving you these lectures because I want you to learn more, so that you understand that Israel is really doing the right thing, and it's worth supporting Israel. You're doing the right thing. So thank you so much for listening tonight. I'm now at the end of our lecture. Thank you so much for joining us here, joining us online, watching in the recording. Thank you for for being here tonight. And that was the end of our lecture. And now, if you have any questions, you can go and we'll have some minutes and answer questions if you have. I will quickly show you the sources I used for the images. They're not important, but just for so that you have them if you need them. And now is the time for questions if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's less of a question, it's more of a little bit more of a background about the British mandate. So one of the things that I learned as an Indian and as a British is that in 1947, Britain was losing its power over India. And the reason why this was important to Israel is because Israel was a very strategic land for the British. So prior to the state of Israel, Britain wanted to hold on to it because India was its crown jewels. So it was for the shipments. But when they had lost India, the independence of India, exactly 1 year later, Israel got its independence because the British found no use of Israel as well. So, you spoke about Ben Gurion not having a religious aspect to the land of Israel becoming a state, but there was loads of other things that were going on strategically and economically that even though we can see God's hand in it, there was some stuff that was going on in the natural realm that warranted that opened up the position for Israel to become the state of Israel. And I actually learned that whilst I was in Israel. The Israelis taught me that, a historian taught me that, that India played a very strategic part in the formation of Israel. And the other thing that I'd like to add is that there was another attack on Yom Kippur last year, and it was in Britain, where 2 Jews were killed at a synagogue. So you're right to say that they seem to target these religious days specifically so that when Israel and the Jewish people are trying to celebrate, there's also this bittersweet celebration because there's a remembrance of the fallen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, thank you for adding that. To your first to the first question or the first thing that you said, I want to add that it's true. India became independent, and that had an effect on Israel. And more than that, there were more countries in this time. There was just a time of countries becoming independent, and so there was a big shift, not only in Israel and this area, but in major parts in the world, especially in Asia. So you could see that while more and more countries became independent, the question for Israel to become independent raised again, especially right after the Shoah, right after the independence of India, and then the British losing their interest that they had so much before in Israel, and now also their decision to leave Israel, and all of that led together to the establishment of Israel. And you could ask, why did it not happen before? Because we see there was a lot more with the Zionist movement, with the Balfour Declaration, the conference in San Remo. There's more things already leading towards it. And here I want to add a quote from Theodor Herzl, who said in 1897, on the first Zionist Congress, he said, maybe in 5 years, but at least in 50 years, we will have a Jewish state. And look, he was quite precise that in 1947, that was exactly 50 years after, that was the beginning of the state of Israel. When 1948 we finally had it. So you're totally right, and thank you for adding that. India played an important role, and the entire it was just the ripe time for it, and the right time to to establish the state of Israel. And to a second thing that you said, yes, it's very sad. I only took some examples, but there's a lot more. But always on the feast of it for Israel, cruel attacks happen, and as you said, it's a bittersweet memories, bittersweet feast. But Israel would not be Israel if they didn't learn from that and survive and show even more their pride in existing. And many of these feasts that they celebrate come from the story of their enemies trying to kill them, but Israel survived and prospered and won. Just as we've celebrated Purim, that is just behind us, and during that time exactly there was the war, or the intensity in the war going more intense in Iran. So history is repeating, and it reminds us that we should learn from what we've seen in history, and we should always take the good out of it. And as we see, Israel not only survives, but Israel prospers, and I believe this is a miracle. So it encourages us all to stay, to learn from the history, and to take Israel as a good example of trusting and fighting and seeing the good outcome. So thank you again. Thank you for everyone who is watching here. Thank you also for all the questions, everything that you add to it. And if you have any question at home and you want to email me, you can email me at Talita, Talita at jhg-fulda, fulda.de. You can always ask me questions. I try to answer. And if you want to donate, I know that I promise this is for free, and this is for free. The lectures is for free, but if you want to donate to this location, to my church where I'm having these lectures, you can donate via the QR code. And if you want to donate to Christians for Israel, an international organization that supports Israel, that you can donate via the other QR code. Christians for Israel supports Israel in many ways. One of the projects is Aliyah Project. So they bring back Jews to their homeland. Aliyah means the coming back to Israel. So becoming a citizen of Israel. So every Jew who from other countries comes back to Israel makes Aliyah. That's how you say it. So Aliyah projects help Jews from all over the world to come back to Israel and to settle there, and to build their life there. So if you want to donate for Christians for Israel, you can choose between many different projects. One of them is the Aliyah project. Other projects are projects within Israel, or supporting Jews all over the world. So they do a really good job. So thank you again for listening, for watching. And next week we'll see again for the last part of our series of lectures. And next week we will talk about Israel and the Middle East before and after October 7th, 2023. Thank you for watching. See you next week.